I knew something was wrong the moment I heard her voice, sharp, low, and far too certain. She won't be a problem anymore. One short sentence. One careless whisper. One truth they thought I would never hear. Before you continue, take a breath. This story is going to stay with you long after it ends. Don't miss a single moment. I sat on the cold basement steps, my hands resting on my knees to stop them from trembling. The wooden boards above my head were old. Older than my son, older than my marriage, older than the quiet bitterness my daughter-in-law carried in her smile. They carried every sound, every footstep, every secret. And tonight they carried the one sentence that changed everything. My first reaction wasn't shock. It was calm, an odd, heavy calm that settled over me like a blanket. When people think you're weak, they talk openly. And when they talk openly, they expose themselves. I inhaled slowly, forcing the stale basement air into my lungs. My throat burned, but I kept still, listening. Somewhere above me, a glass clinked, followed by my son's tired sigh. I imagined him rubbing the back of his neck the same way he used to when he was a teenager hiding bad grades. He didn't answer her. Silence from him was nothing new, but tonight it felt different. He wasn't disagreeing. He wasn't defending me. He was letting her speak for both of them. I looked toward the far corner where a faint blue light blinked. Most people would have missed it. But not me. My husband installed that tiny security camera 20 years ago, back when storms used to flood the basement. The hardware was old, but it still worked. Quiet, unnoticed, loyal. He had told me once, gently tapping my shoulder, "If I'm ever gone and something doesn't feel right, check the basement." He always did have a way of knowing things before they happened. I pressed my palm against the cold step beside me. The rough wood scratched my skin, grounding me in the moment. I wasn't imagining this. I wasn't confused. I wasn't sick. I was simply witnessing the truth, raw and undeniable. Upstairs, footsteps moved toward the kitchen. The refrigerator door opened. The humming sound changed pitch. Someone poured water. Someone else whispered something too soft for me to catch. I held my breath, leaning slightly forward, listening for anything that told me what they were planning. Then I heard it, the faint scrape of my teacup sliding across the counter. Her voice followed. "Make sure she drinks it this time. She's stubborn." A cold sensation crept down my spine, but I didn't move. I didn't cry or gasp or pray. I simply listened. Listening keeps you alive when speaking might get you hurt. The wooden beams above me vibrated with their movement. Light footsteps, hers. Heavy, reluctant ones. His. I could picture her standing in the doorway, arms crossed, chin raised, her tone dripping with the false sweetness she used whenever people were watching. Except now no one was watching and she didn't need sweetness. "She's old," she said casually. "No one will question anything." My son didn't respond again. Not one word. I closed my eyes and breathed through my nose. The basement smelled of dust, old paint, and the faint mustiness of cardboard boxes that hadn't been opened in years. Somewhere near the furnace, water dripped steadily, soft, rhythmic, familiar. The sound used to bother me. Now it felt like the only thing in the house that still made sense. A sudden thud from above made me flinch. Something had fallen. A drawer? A tray? Another glass? Their voices hushed immediately. And then laughter. Soft at first, then fuller. Not joyful, not warm, just careless. The laughter of two people who believed they were safe. I rose from the steps slowly, steadying myself on the railing. My knees protested, but I ignored the pain. I walked deeper into the basement, past old holiday decorations, boxes of winter coats, and the trunk where my husband kept his tools. The blinking blue camera reflected faintly on a metal pipe. I touched the pipe and felt the coolness against my skin. I wasn't trapped. They only thought I was. Near the back wall, the utility vent rattled lightly. It was narrow, dusty, and poorly installed, the kind of vent that carried sound more clearly than air. I leaned close, resting my ear against the metal. Their voices flowed through like a radio signal. "Her pension. House will be ours. Just a matter of time." I didn't need to hear more. I stepped away from the vent, slow and steady. The basement light, an old pull-chain bulb, flickered above me. Shadows crawled along the walls. Dust floated in the narrow beam of light. I pulled the chain slightly to stop it swaying. Everything felt too quiet now. I walked toward the set of shelves against the left wall. Behind the paint cans and toolboxes was a shoebox, plain, brown, and unmarked. Inside it were the small things I kept hidden. Old receipts, keys my son didn't know existed, spare cash, and a tiny flash drive my husband had handed me on a winter morning years ago. He had kissed my cheek and said softly, "Just in case you ever need proof of something." I never knew why his tone sounded so grave back then. Now I understood. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, feeling its small weight like a promise. Suddenly, footsteps approached the basement door. Slow, cautious steps. I moved back toward the stairs but stayed far enough in the shadows that only my outline would be visible if someone peeked in. The doorknob turned slightly. A thin sliver of hallway light cut through the darkness. Her voice drifted down, soft and testing. "Are you awake down there?" I didn't answer. Silence is a weapon too. The door creaked open just enough for her to lean down. I saw her shadow before I saw her face. Her hair hung forward like a curtain as she peered through the crack. The faint light behind her highlighted the sharpness of her jaw and the tight line of her mouth. Our eyes met. Just for a second. Just long enough for her to see that I wasn't as helpless as she hoped. Her expression flickered, confusion, irritation, and something like fear, but it vanished quickly. She pulled the door shut again, whispering something I couldn't hear. Her footsteps retreated faster this time. I waited in absolute stillness until the sound faded completely. Then I exhaled, not in panic but in quiet understanding. This wasn't about tea. This wasn't about age. This wasn't even about money. This was about control. And tonight they believed they had it. But they were wrong. I climbed 2 steps, then stopped when a faint vibration under my feet caught my attention. Someone had moved into the hallway again. I heard the soft shuffle of slippers, followed by my son's muted voice. Carried none of the warmth he used to show me. "Just leave her for now," he mumbled. "We'll check later." Leave me. In my own house. In the basement I scrubbed, organized, and used to store their childhood memories. I sat back down on the step, letting the cold wood press against my legs. The tiny camera blinked steadily in the corner. The flash drive was warm in my pocket. And the vent hummed with their muffled conversations. I folded my hands in my lap, staring at the stairs leading to the door they had closed on me. They thought they were ending something. They had no idea what they had started. And when she whispered one last time, soft, smug, certain, I knew I would never forget the sound. Because her whisper was the beginning of my revenge. And the moment she realized that would come later. The basement door clicked shut again and her whisper faded into the hallway. But I kept my eyes fixed on the stairs long after her footsteps disappeared. I stayed completely still, letting the house settle into its nighttime rhythm. Floorboards creaked. Pipes groaned. A faint hum from the refrigerator trembled through the walls. Somewhere above me, a chair scraped across the kitchen tiles, then silence returned like a heavy blanket. I didn't stand immediately. I let my breathing adjust, slow and steady, giving my heart time to calm its frantic beating. They thought I was trapped. They believed fear would keep me frozen on these wooden steps. And for a moment maybe it had. But their arrogance had also given me time. Time to listen, time to notice, time to think. Time is a gift when no one expects you to survive long enough to use it. I rose carefully, gripping the railing to steady my weight. My legs felt stiff from sitting too long in the cold. My fingers tingled either from age or adrenaline, I couldn't tell which. I took one step then another, testing the old boards for sound. They groaned softly under my weight but not enough to give me away. The trick was to move slowly, shift my weight toward the edges, and breathe shallowly so even my heartbeat wouldn't feel loud. I stopped halfway up the staircase when a distant murmur echoed from the living room. Her voice again, tight, frustrated, followed by my son's low reply. I leaned forward slightly, listening. "We can't wait forever," she muttered. "She's old," he said, sounding tired. "She'll give in soon." "Not if she keeps getting up," she snapped. "You saw her earlier." I stiffened. So she had noticed that brief moment when our eyes met through the crack in the door. I hadn't shown fear and she didn't like that. I pulled back into the shadows, letting the darkness wrap around my shoulders like a cloak. My body might have been fragile but my instincts were still sharp. I couldn't climb another step until I was certain they weren't close. I steadied my breathing and touched the wall to feel for vibrations. A habit I learned after years in the old house. If someone walked nearby, the plaster always hummed faintly. Tonight, the wall stayed silent. I reached the top step and paused at the door. The wood felt warmer here, carrying the heat from the hallway. I placed my hand against it, fingertips light, and waited. Under my palm I sensed nothing. No footsteps, no movement, no breath on the other side. Just stillness. When I turned the knob, it felt looser than before. They hadn't locked it properly. Maybe they assumed the darkness would stop me. Maybe they assumed I was too weak. Maybe they simply didn't care because they believed time was working in their favor. The latch clicked softly and I winced, holding my breath. But no one reacted. The house didn't stir. I eased the door open an inch at a time, grateful for every bit of silence. A thin streak of hallway light slid across the basement steps, bright compared to the shadows I'd been sitting in for hours. I stepped onto the hallway carpet, feeling its softness beneath my bare feet. The house smelled different up here. Warmer, a mixture of leftover dinner, laundry detergent, and the faint scent of the candles she liked to burn after arguing. I scanned the hallway. Left led to the living room. Right led to the kitchen and the back door. Voices drifted from the living room. They were arguing again. Not loudly, but with that clipped tension two people share when they don't want to wake anyone. I heard my name once, then twice, but I didn't wait to hear the context. Every moment I stayed increased the chance they'd see me. I turned right, walking slowly but with purpose, keeping close to the wall to avoid the creakiest tiles. Years of living here had taught me where to step and where to avoid. I passed the tiny hallway table, the one with the chipped corner I kept meaning to fix. On it sat a stack of unopened mail, a pair of reading glasses, and a bowl of keys. Those keys mattered. I reached for the bowl but stopped when the argument in the living room grew sharper. "I told you she's stubborn," her voice hissed. "And I told you I'm handling it," my son snapped. I pulled my hand back. Taking the keys now would create too much noise. I moved on. The kitchen was dim, lit only by the fridge's faint glow. The floor tiles felt colder than the hallway carpet. A mug sat in the sink, a spoon inside it still damp. I wondered if that had been mine, if she had poured something into my tea before sending me downstairs earlier. The thought made my stomach tighten, but I pushed it away. I couldn't give fear any space tonight. My focus locked onto the back door. The soft night breeze slipped through the gaps in the old frame, brushing my skin with cool air. Freedom was only a few steps away. I reached for the handle but hesitated when another sound reached my ears. The low hum of the outside security light clicking on. It always flickered before turning fully bright. If I opened the door at the wrong moment, the motion sensor would expose me instantly. I crouched slightly, the motion slowed to protect my knees, and peeked through the thin window beside the door. The backyard lay quiet under the moonlight. The grass shimmered pale silver. The old oak tree cast a long shadow over the fence. Nothing moved. I waited until the security light dimmed again. 3 seconds of darkness. That was all I needed. I took a deep breath, preparing to turn the lock, but then something caught my eye, the side counter. On it sat the small flash drive my husband had given me earlier from the basement box. I had placed it there months ago, thinking I'd transfer the files eventually. But I never got around to it. And now, it felt important. I moved toward it carefully, every step deliberate. When I reached the counter, I grabbed the flash drive and tucked it into my pocket. It felt heavier now, as if it carried more than just old files. I turned back to the door. A floorboard creaked behind me. I froze. My heart thudded painfully. Another soft creak followed, not close but close enough. Someone was walking toward the kitchen. I glanced around in a panic but forced myself to stay silent. The pantry door was too far. The dining room table wouldn't hide me. The only option was the shadow by the refrigerator, where the counter created a narrow, dark corner. I pressed myself into it, flattening my back, holding my breath so tightly my ribs ached. Soft footsteps entered the hallway. She cleared her throat. "Michael," she whispered. No answer. Her steps moved closer. I closed my eyes, counting each second. 1, 2, 3. She stepped into the kitchen doorway, her silhouette faintly outlined by the light from the living room. Her head turned slightly, scanning the darkness. The refrigerator hummed loudly, covering the faint sound of my breathing. She stood there for several moments, arms crossed, tapping her foot impatiently. Then she sighed. "I'm not doing everything alone," she muttered. And she left. Only when the sound of her footsteps faded did I allow myself to exhale. My legs shook as I reached for the door again. This time I didn't hesitate. I turned the lock slowly, pushed the door open and stepped outside into the night air. The cold hit me immediately, sharp, clean, shocking. But it felt like freedom. I closed the door carefully, making sure it didn't slam. The porch light flickered but didn't fully turn on. I stepped down the stairs, wincing as my knees protested again. The gravel path leading to the driveway felt rough beneath my feet, but I kept going. When I reached the edge of the yard, I stopped and looked back. The house stood completely still. Dark windows. Silent rooms. False peace. I whispered softly to myself, "Keep walking." And I did. I walked into the night, weak, exhausted, trembling, but alive. And they didn't know it yet. I didn't stop walking until the first soft glow of morning touched the edge of the sky. My breath came in small, uneven clouds, and each step felt heavier than the last. By the time I reached the bus shelter near the gas station, my legs were shaking. I sat on the cold metal bench and pressed my hand over my pocket, feeling the outline of the flash drive against my fingers. It was still there. Somehow that small fact kept me steady. A taxi rolled to a stop in front of me. The driver leaned out of the window, his voice groggy. "Ma'am, you need a ride somewhere?" I hesitated, not because I didn't know where to go, but because I needed a moment to steady my voice. "Downtown," I whispered. "To Jefferson and Main. The office building there." He nodded, unlocking the door. "Hop in. Cold morning for a walk." The heater blasted warm air against my face, prickling my skin until the numbness faded. I stared out the window as the streets passed by, empty sidewalks, a bakery just opening, a delivery truck reversing into an alley. Normal scenes. Ordinary life. And I wondered how the world kept moving like nothing had changed. It took about 15 minutes to reach the tall brick building with the dark green awning. I paid the driver, stepped out, and felt the strange mixture of fear and relief as I pushed the door open. The lobby smelled faintly of polished floors and brewed coffee. A woman behind the front desk looked up, surprised by my early arrival. "Mrs. Hayes?" she asked softly. "Yes," I whispered. "He's already in," she added, lowering her voice. "He comes in early when he knows there's something important." I nodded and made my way down the hall. My knees still hurt from the night's escape, but the pain felt distant, secondary, necessary even. I reached the familiar oak door, lifted my trembling hand and knocked twice. "Come in," a calm voice called. I stepped inside. My lawyer, Peter, sat behind his desk, sleeves rolled up, glasses perched low on his nose as he reviewed paperwork. He stood immediately when he saw me. "By God," he breathed. "Are you all right?" I couldn't answer right away. Not because I was overwhelmed, but because this was the first time in hours that someone had looked at me with genuine concern. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "I need you to do what we discussed." He exhaled slowly, guiding me toward the chair. "Sit down. Take a moment." But I shook my head. "No. Please. There isn't time." He studied me carefully, then nodded. He knew better than to push. I handed him the flash drive. He recognized it immediately, the one he had asked about months ago when helping me adjust my estate. "Is this the rest of the recordings?" "Some," I said. "Enough." He slid it into his laptop, scanned the files, and nodded again. "I'll add these to the evidence folder." He didn't ask what had happened last night. He didn't need to. He could see enough in my face. The exhaustion, the fear I kept trying to swallow, the quiet determination growing beneath it. He opened a drawer and took out a thick, well-organized binder with my name written neatly on the cover. I recognized it instantly. My updated will. My trust documents. The quiet choices I had made months ago when I first felt something dark shifting in the house. "We finalized everything exactly as you wanted," he reminded me gently. "All assets moved into the living trust. Beneficiary listed as Emma." A soft ache settled in my chest at the mention of her name. My granddaughter. The only one who ever truly listened. The only one who hugged me without calculation. "And they can't touch any of it?" I asked. He shook his head firmly. "Not even with a court order. Not unless you change the documents yourself." A strange calm washed over me, not relief but something steadier. Something that felt like strength. But he wasn't finished. "I also prepared the protective provisions we discussed," he said carefully, opening another file. "In case you ever needed to take action." "Action," I repeated softly. Such a simple word. But for a woman in my position it meant everything. He placed a few pages in front of me. Formal requests, freezing orders, interview notices. Quiet steps. Legal steps. Steps that would force them to face the consequences of decisions they thought no one would ever discover. I brushed my fingers over the top page. Are you sure we can do this? He looked me in the eyes. Mrs. Hayes, you've been documenting everything for a long time. You knew something wasn't right. You protected yourself. You have more proof than most people ever do. Proof, I echoed, the word heavy but grounding. That's what he wanted. He softened. Your husband was a smart man. I nodded slowly. He was. Peter closed the folder gently. Before we move forward, there's one more thing. He handed me a small voice recorder. You gave this to me months ago. Are you prepared to include the recordings in the official file? My hand shook slightly as I took it back. I remembered the night I had used it, quietly slipping it under the dining table when their whispered argument drifted through the house. She doesn't need to know everything, she had said. She'll figure it out eventually, my son replied. Then we handle it before she does. I didn't respond to Peter's question. I just set the recorder on top of the binder. That was answer enough. He nodded once. All right. We'll proceed. For a moment silence filled the office. Not awkward, not heavy, just thoughtful. Then he asked gently, do you want to rest before we begin the filings? I shook my head. If I sit still too long I might lose the courage I have right now. He understood. He always did. As he started preparing the documents I looked around his office. The framed certificates, the potted plant by the window, the stack of neatly organized files. It felt safe here. Quiet. Structured. Unlike the house I had walked out of hours earlier. I took a slow breath, letting the warmth of the room ease into my bones. My stomach grumbled faintly, the first reminder that I hadn't eaten since the afternoon before, but I ignored it. There was something more important than hunger right now. I watched him print copies, organize them, slide papers into envelopes. Each click of the stapler felt like a small piece of order returning to my life. After a while he turned to me. These filings will trigger interviews within 48 hours. They won't know what's coming. My chest tightened, not with fear, but with a quiet, deliberate resolve. And the estate? I asked softly. He lifted the binder again. Completely secure. And when they ask about it... He paused, giving me space. I finished the sentence myself. They'll find out it was never theirs. He gave me a long, steady look. Are you ready for that day? I swallowed. I've been ready for months. Another silence settled, gentle, respectful. Then he sealed the last envelope and placed his hand on it. This is the beginning, he said quietly. I nodded. Yes. A beginning. Not revenge. Not triumph. Just the first true step toward reclaiming the life they had tried to take from me. And the will, the one they assumed I was too fragile to understand, too old to manage, lay closed on the desk between us. Waiting. Unopened. Undiscovered. Unimagined by them. But already in motion. And that, alone, was enough to make me breathe easier for the first time in a very long time. Lay closed on the desk between us. Waiting, untouched, already in motion. And that small truth filled my lungs with something like strength. I left Peter's office with that feeling wrapped around me like a second coat. The morning air was chilly, but it no longer stung. It felt earned. Outside, the city was waking up slowly. Buses rumbling past, shopkeepers lifting their shutters, a jogger huffing along the sidewalk with a red face and tangled earbuds. Ordinary life. I stood there for a moment, letting the noise settle into my ears. Then I walked toward the corner, where the sunlight hit the pavement in long, pale stripes. My legs ached from the night before, but I didn't rush. What needed to happen was already beginning. Quietly, professionally, inevitably. There was nothing dramatic or loud about legal truth. It simply worked its way outward, step by step, like warm water slowly filling a cold room. By the time I reached home, the house was quiet. Too quiet. I stepped onto the porch carefully, the wood creaking under my weight. The windows were closed, the curtains drawn tightly, like the house itself was holding its breath. I turned the knob and stepped inside. My son was standing in the living room, pacing. His hair was uncombed and his shirt buttoned wrong, as if he had thrown it on in a hurry. When he heard the door close, he spun around. "Mom." His voice cracked. "Where were you?" I held his gaze calm steady. Out, I answered simply. His jaw tightened. You can't just disappear like that. We were. He stopped himself, glancing toward the kitchen. We were worried. Worried. The word tasted bitter. But I didn't comment on it. He took a step forward, rubbing the back of his neck. The same habit he had during childhood when he hid something he didn't know how to confess. Mom, whatever you thought you heard last night, it wasn't. I didn't mention hearing anything, I interrupted softly. His face paled. For a moment we stood in silence, the tension pulsing like a heartbeat between us. Then she walked in. My daughter-in-law appeared from the hallway, her hair brushed neatly, makeup applied, expression composed. But her eyes flicked over me with a hint of irritation. She had expected me to look defeated. Instead I looked present. Awake. Collected. You're back, she said, her voice smooth but tight. Yes, I said, nodding. She folded her arms. We should talk. There are things we need to clear up. I didn't sit. I didn't argue. I simply walked past her toward the dining table, where a pile of papers lay scattered, mail, bank statements, grocery lists. One envelope caught my eye. The return address belonged to the estate management office. I didn't touch it, but I noticed her gaze dart toward it nervously. Is there something you want to say to me? I asked quietly, settling into the chair. Her lips pressed together. We've been handling your affairs because you weren't keeping up with things. She said it with the gentle cruelty of someone who had practiced the line in the mirror. I didn't react. I let her continue. You've been forgetting dates, mixing things up. The stress is too much for you. We were trying to help. How? I asked. By speaking in whispers? By locking doors? By making decisions behind my back? My son flinched. He didn't. You're imagining things, she snapped softly. Then more controlled. Look, we're all tired. Last night was chaotic. Chaotic. A strange way to describe poisoning tea and dragging someone into a basement. But I didn't argue. I didn't need to. A knock at the door broke the stale air. My daughter-in-law stiffened. My son frowned. No one visited this early. I'll get it, I said, rising slowly. They didn't stop me. They couldn't, not without revealing they were nervous. I walked to the door, keeping my back straight despite the ache in my hips. When I opened it, a man in a gray jacket stood there, holding a sealed envelope. Mrs. Hayes. Yes. This is for you. Time sensitive. He handed me the envelope and left without another word. No eye contact, no curiosity. Just business. Exactly as Peter had promised. Behind me I heard her soft gasp. She recognized the seal on the envelope. She tried to hide it, but I saw her hands clench. What's that? She asked from the hallway, her voice too bright. I turned slowly. It's addressed to me. Well, open it, she urged, taking an involuntary step forward. Maybe it's important. It is, I replied. I didn't open it in front of them. Instead, I tucked it under my arm and walked to the kitchen. My daughter-in-law followed. My son stayed frozen behind her. In the kitchen, I set the envelope on the table. My hands were steady as I broke the seal. Inside were several documents. Official, stamped, clear. The first notice. Interview scheduling, required attendance. Names listed. Michael Hayes. Danielle Hayes. Second. Financial review inquiry, joint accounts and withdrawals. The third. Confirmation of trust ownership, property protected. I didn't need to speak. The room spoke for me. When I laid the papers on the table, my daughter-in-law's face drained of color. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for the top page, but I placed my fingers over it before she could touch it. Don't, I said calmly. It's not for you. She froze. My son stepped into the room then, his voice unsteady. Mom, what's going on? I looked at him gently with a softness I didn't entirely feel. It's just paperwork, I said. Paperwork I should have done a long time ago. He swallowed. This looks serious. It is. He paced, running his hands through his hair. He looked scared, really scared for the first time in a long while. My daughter-in-law tried to regain control. This is ridiculous. Someone must have filled something out wrong. We haven't done anything. A lie delivered with perfect confidence. But lies are fragile things. Truth is heavier. Before she could continue, there was another knock at the door. Sharper. More official. When my son opened it, 2 uniformed officers stood outside. Not hostile, not aggressive, just professional. Michael and Danielle Hayes? One officer asked. My son nodded weakly. We're here to deliver statements for your scheduled interviews. You'll need to read these carefully and respond promptly. My daughter-in-law stared at them, stunned. Interviews? But why? That information is inside, the officer said. We recommend you cooperate. They handed over the envelopes, tipped their hats politely and walked back to their car. My house, once a place of warmth and family dinners, felt like a courtroom now. No raised voices. No dramatic reactions. Just consequences arriving quietly, exactly as truth often does. My daughter-in-law sank into a chair. My son sat across from her, burying his face in his hands. For the first time neither of them spoke. Not to each other. Not to me. I stood in the doorway watching the two people who had once believed they controlled everything. Now they looked small, brittle children caught in a storm they couldn't stop. And still I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I felt steady, present, alive. A soft breeze slipped through the open window, carrying the scent of cut grass and morning fog. It brushed my cheek like a quiet reminder. This was only the beginning of their unraveling. They hadn't yet seen the will. They didn't know about the trust. They didn't realize what their interviews would reveal. But they would. And as they sat there, pale and silent, I felt the smallest shift inside me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, but closure beginning to form. Their world hadn't collapsed all at once. It was collapsing piece by piece. Quietly. Fully. Just the way truth works. My house was silent as they sat at the dining table. My son with his hands pressed against his forehead. My daughter-in-law staring at the interview notices as if the paper itself might suddenly change its mind. I stood in the doorway, steady and calm, watching the two people who had spent years assuming they held the upper hand. Now the only thing they held was fear. And that fear was finally, painfully honest. I stepped forward slowly, letting each footfall land softly on the wood. The sunlight filtered through the blinds, casting long bars of gold across the floor, warming my ankles, my calves, the hem of my sweater. I felt the warmth sink into my bones. Their world had already begun to crack. Now it was time for it to fall completely. Mom, my son whispered, his voice breaking. You don't understand what this looks like. I understand perfectly, I said softly. He lifted his head, eyes red, lips trembling. I waited. I wanted him to speak honestly for once, without rehearsing, without hiding behind her. But she spoke instead. This isn't fair, she snapped, her voice suddenly sharp. All of this, these letters, these accusations, how can they just show up without warning? Someone must be lying. Someone is, I agreed quietly. Her eyes narrowed. You're doing this. You're turning everything upside down. I sat across from her, folding my hands neatly in my lap. No, Danielle. I simply stopped letting things stay the way you liked them. My son swallowed hard, staring down at his fingers. His wedding ring gleamed faintly in the morning light. For a moment I felt a small ache, an echo of the little boy who once ran to me with scraped knees and tearful confessions. But then I remembered the basement. The whispers. The she won't be a problem anymore. The ache disappeared. Before either of them could say more, the doorbell rang again. This time my son didn't move to answer it. He didn't have the strength. I rose slowly, walked to the foyer and opened the door. A woman in a charcoal suit stood there, holding a slim briefcase. She showed me her badge politely. Mrs. Hayes? I'm from the estate office. I'm here for the scheduled delivery. I stepped aside, letting her in. She greeted my son and daughter-in-law with a professional nod. Nothing accusatory, nothing emotional. Just procedure. She set her briefcase on the table, unclasped it, and pulled out a thick sealed folder with my name written in clean, dark ink. Mrs. Hayes, she said, sliding it toward me, this contains the final verification of your estate arrangements, including property ownership, trust protection, and beneficiary confirmation. My daughter-in-law lunged forward slightly. Shouldn't we be allowed to review it too? We live here. The agent paused. Only the owner may review these documents. I am the owner, I said gently. The woman nodded. Correct. She packed her briefcase, left a card on the table in case I had questions, and departed. Her shoes clicked down the walkway until the sound faded into the quiet morning. I sat again. My daughter-in-law stared at the folder as if it were a lit fuse leading to an explosion she had no power to stop. My son took a slow breath, bracing himself. I opened the folder. The first document confirmed the trust. Unbreakable, untouchable, fully transferred months ago. The second confirmed that every asset, house, savings, land, investments, belonged solely to me and would remain protected until I passed. The third listed the beneficiary. Her, Emma. My granddaughter. My daughter-in-law shot to her feet. This is a joke. Has to be. Why would you leave everything to her? Because, I said, closing the folder, she never asked for anything. My son stood now, panic flushing his cheeks. Mom, please just listen. Danielle and I thought we could help you manage things. We didn't mean. Didn't mean what? I asked, lifting my eyes slowly to his. Didn't mean to isolate me? Didn't mean to make decisions about my life without my consent? Didn't mean to discuss my death like a solution? His mouth opened but no sound came out. I leaned back slightly, letting the truth settle in the air between us. You two only saw what you wanted to see, I continued. You thought age made me blind. You thought dependency would make me quiet. But you didn't see the recordings. You didn't see the documents. You didn't think anyone would believe a woman my age. My daughter-in-law's voice cracked. This isn't fair. Fair. I repeated softly. Fair is what you receive when you give fairness. You gave me none. She sank back into her chair, breathing hard. I reached into the folder again and pulled out one final document, a copy of the will itself. I slid it across the table, letting it stop right in front of them. My daughter-in-law grabbed it with shaking hands, desperate. Her eyes scanned the lines quickly, then slower. Her lips parted. She read the name again and again. Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes. Emma Hayes. Everything. Every line. Every asset. Every possession. Not theirs. She looked up at me, her face ghost pale. You planned this. Her voice wasn't angry anymore. It was frightened. Yes, I admitted. After I realized what you two were planning with those whispers. And that tea. And that basement. My son shut his eyes, shoulders shaking. When he opened them, tears rolled down his cheeks. Mom, I'm sorry. He said it like an apology he had never practiced. Raw, unsteady, real. But apologies are strange things. Sometimes they arrive after too much damage. Sometimes they solve nothing. Sometimes they come far too late. I reached for the folder gently, pulled it back and closed it with a soft click. You will have interviews in a few days. Cooperate. Answer honestly. The rest will unfold without me. My daughter-in-law whispered, What will happen to us? That, I said calmly, depends on whether you tell the truth. They both stared at me then, silent, shaken, small. And I felt it. Something inside me opened. Not joy. Not triumph. Not even revenge. Just release. I stood, taking the folder with me, and walked down the hallway with slow, even steps. I placed it inside the cabinet where I kept my husband's old tools, locking it quietly. When I returned, they were still sitting there, not speaking to each other. I picked up my coat, opened the front door, and said over my shoulder, Please leave my home by tonight. My son looked up, tears still streaking his cheeks. Mom, where will you go? I'm going where I should have gone long ago, I said. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. The crisp afternoon air hit my face. Somewhere down the street, a car honked. Leaves rustled on the sidewalk. A dog barked. Normal life. Peaceful life. I walked to the bench under the old maple tree, the one my husband planted when our son was born. Its branches stretched overhead, filtering sunlight in dappled patterns across the ground. And then I heard footsteps. Soft, running footsteps. Grandma, a familiar voice called. Emma. She ran into my arms, breathless, warm, safe. Her embrace melted the last bit of coldness still trapped inside me. I got your message, she said, pulling back to search my face. Are you really okay? For the first time in a long while, I whispered, smoothing her hair. I am. She sat beside me, holding my hand. Where will you live now? Here, I said, looking up at the house. But with the right people around me. People who care. Her eyes softened. I'll help you. I'll come every day if I have to. I smiled, the first genuine smile in months. I know. We sat together in the golden afternoon light, the world quiet and warm around us. For the first time in years, I felt safe in my own skin, in my own home, in my own life. Their control was gone. Their plans had failed. Their world had collapsed. Me. I had reclaimed mine. The breeze whispered through the maple leaves, gentle and comforting, and I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting peace settle deep inside me. A peace they never expected me to reach. A peace I had earned. And a peace I would never let go of again. I wasn't just alive, I was finally free. If this story touched your heart or reminded you of a truth too many women live through, please subscribe. Your support helps me bring more powerful stories of strength, justice, and quiet courage.